All right, welcome back from the lunch break. Hope everyone online is able to be participating. We're going to start now. It's 1 o'clock, and hand it over to Vice Chair Mike French to continue with the task 2 discussion.
All right, excellent. Karina, are you on?
I am.
Excellent. So Karina did help did quite a bit of work here to help put this together. And so the task 2, if we could put up the task 2 slides, please.
Or go back to the first slide then.
Excellent. If we go to the next slide. All right, so the general charge here from AST for suggestions around workforce. This has taken particular interest to me personally, and then Ranking Member Sorensen asked me to brief the committee back up on what we talked about today. So I'm really looking forward to a robust discussion instead of recommendations. But just to sort of walk through, so we had, if you all saw this, ahead of the meeting, we go through it. There's a series of recommendations that could help in this regard. But sort of what we were thinking is that's, I think, less useful in a vacuum. And so I think what we're going to have, I think Min will be our AST support on this one. Sure. Is that right? Sure. I'd really like to have AST, they're not going to provide their recommendation on the recommendation, but certainly would like their insight, right? Are the things that we've raised here useful, right? Is this something you've tried before? Is this something you'd like to try, right? I feel like that input could be incredibly useful here. I think also, this morning we were talking to Kelvin. I think Matt had some good questions to Kelvin and some information about sort of where we stand on the hiring side. If you don't mind, is there sort of big picture kind of view on sort of where things stand, sort of some of the current pressures that could sort of just help set the discussion?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Should I be?
Yeah, why don't you want to grab a table, the chair up here would be great.
Okay.
So I'll just right there.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. So just to begin with, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Min Nguyen, and I'm the Executive Director for the Office of Strategic Management within the Commercial Space Transportation Office. And I report to Mr. Michael O'Donnell and Kelvin. I hope my workforce is part of my portfolio. And so thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I want to start off with, you asked for sort of the high level sort of workforce planning activity sort of thing. So as Mr. Kelvin today highlighted that, today we hit a pretty amazing hiring target for AST of we're going to hire as most as we could for the budget availability and authorization as well as affordability, and that's 158 positions by the end of the fiscal year. We targeted by the end of the fiscal year, but we achieved it earlier than that a week or two ago. So that made Kelvin pretty happy, that made Mike pretty happy, and that made me pretty happy about that. Now, moving forward, I think this is no secret that we have a president's budget supporting us. And it's also amazing that we have Congress, both House and Senate marks, also give us pretty favorable budget marks as well. So we look forward to that. Now, depending on the when we get the budget, and what the language of the budget would be, that would direct us as to what to do, when to do certain activities, then we would adhere to that language responsibly. And I know there's some differences in the language between the House and the Presidents and the Senate, which I'm not going to go into. So the bottom line is we're looking forward to this budget appropriations coming up soon, whenever it comes. If there's a CR, we budget planning on based on CR, but we're looking forward to getting a budget that is very favorable to us at this point. We don't want to lose this opportunity because I think we've heard from industry loud and clear as to opportunities for us to put more resources and staff into working licensing activities as well as other relating activities to licensing. So that's what we're moving forward with 25. As soon as we get the budget, we are executing. We're not planning at that time. We have already been planning to execute the FY 25 president's budget for quite some time already. We have a plan in place. When we get the budget, we hit the ground running on that. So that's on the budget front. And I believe that in various marks, AST, if we're getting the level that we're getting based on the language that we currently see at this point, it could be anywhere between 40 to 45 additional staff for AST to focus on various activities, including licensing as a priority and others relating activities as well. So we're looking forward to that. Hiring 40, 45 positions within 1 year, certainly has its challenges on a number of fronts, including getting the level of talent pools that we need, the right people that we need to bring on board, and the timing it takes to bring people on board as well. Luckily for AST and for the FAA, we are authorized with direct hiring authorities on a number of positions, especially for aerospace engineers. And that is a huge plus as compared to some other government agencies that may not have that. I speak with some of the colleagues who struggle a lot with hiring several positions because not having that direct hire authority. We do have that. And we have been leveraging that over the last couple of years successfully, this year successfully, and I anticipate that as we're hiring more for next year, once given the budget, that it's going to be successfully executed as well. Now, it boils down to when we're anticipating the CR, how long it'll last, and when we're getting budget. And from that, how long, in terms of timeline, that we have in order to get all the budget in place and actually do the hiring. Do we have the full year? If we have the full year, then great. If we have 9 months to hire, great. If we have only a couple of months, it'll be a big challenge for us, pulling all the moving parts together. But we have done it already a number of years up to now. We had several hiring searches for a decent sized office like AST. We've done several years already. We did this year with a big hiring effort. So we think we're going to continue to do that next year as well. Now, to what extent, how many months we have to execute that plan, the more time we have, the more favorable it is for us. So that's more on the hiring front. Any questions so far?
So just out of curiosity, man, is office space an issue? Is there room in this building, or do you telework, or do you have other locations, or is that not a problem?
Office space is a challenge as we, especially we're planning for the hiring search that we're anticipating for next year. We have been trying to find opportunities to get additional physical footprint for AST. We got some this year that we were able to allocate some people to, including my office and several others. I know Mr. Kelvin Coleman and Mike have been engaging with higher leadership at the FAA looking for additional footprint for AST in headquarters and also in other locations. It will continue to be a challenge for us to look for additional space. When the opportunity presents that we can have staff who can do telework, then we'll allow them the options, which we do have. The FAA has a current policy to allow people to report to the office 2 times a week. And work remotely at other times, and so we have been complying with that order so far.
It was a great scene setter. So I think maybe if we do this, and Kelvin, what I was saying is, we put together some recommendation on workbook, but I think it's really useful more as a discussion item to make sure that it's not stuff you already tried, or I think your experience is really important to this topic. And so, maybe I'll hand it back to you, and then as we go through the recommendations, maybe we stop and have a discussion on each and get some feedback, as well as I think, certainly have a more, beyond the recommendations, we can have a discussion also, just move on. So that works. I'll hand it back to you, Karina.
Yeah, that sounds great. First, I will ask General Mercer, did you have a question on Min's proposal or Min's words?
Yes, thanks, Corinne Reese. Just a couple of questions and thoughts on the office space question. Did the FAA relinquish the office spaces they had over in LaFont Plaza and other leased locations? Did they relinquish that already, or is that still available for use for office space?
I believe that the space at the portal's office have been, is not being used anymore. The people from that space has been given the opportunity to do telework, and that's for the next gen organization. I think part of LaFont, is not being used, but to what extent, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so anyway, what I was getting at is that may be an option, right? Is to go back and re-energize those leases to put people there if you needed to. So that was the thought there. The next question I had on, and again, congratulations on the FAA being able to convince and get additional resources, being able to actually get funding to go hire people. That's huge in this environment and in Washington. So congratulations on that. That's great to see. But has there been any kind of manpower study done to see what your target numbers should be versus where you are now or where you think you'll be in the near future? Have you done a manpower study to determine what that ought to be?
We have done to a certain extent on that, General. I can share with you that the president's budget reflects what we need for 2025. And we have done some exercise for 26 as well and beyond, but I am not at liberty to share what the level would be for beyond 2025, because we reflect the president's budget as we move on.
But I'll add to that. I mean, yeah, we do look at staffing models, considering things like attrition and other things like that. We do have a good sense of, and I was asked last week, what's the right number? We do have a sense of what the right number is. And as Min said, the right number is the President's budget request for 25. But, looking further out, we do have some vision as to what we will need to meet demand moving forward. So we do go through labor analysis, work through and take a hard look at, no kidding, what are our staffing needs and in what areas specifically.
Yeah, that's what a manpower study will do for you. So anyway, okay, so I did ask. Thanks for that. And then one final question on the manpower piece is the FAA has access to FFRDC support in the form of MITRE and aerospace. This is not really MITRE's forte, but certainly aerospace, has expertise in the commercial space arena and the lift arena. How do you fold in the aerospace support that the FAA already pays for, by the way, to augment your technical manpower needs?
Right. General, so specifically for AST, we do have contracts in place with both MITRE and aerospace. For MITRE, we have something in the form of industrial work funding, which is outside of the MITRE base funds that the rest of the FAA uses. And every time when there's a need for MITRE to come in and study a certain activity, for example, safety project, we bring MITRE in for that, based on their knowledge and experience on that matter. Regarding aerospace, we do have, a contract vehicle with aerospace for the last number of years already, and we will continue that engagement with aerospace moving forward. And under the contract vehicle, we do have a number of task orders depending on what our needs are. Some of the needs would focus on, augmenting our work with mishaps investigations and other technical analyses. So, those are the two major FRDCs that you highlighted. In addition, when we had projects that we need further help, we also pull in the RAND Corporation as well for our help. So those are the areas that we leverage FRDCs to augment the work that we do.
Okay, one thing that's often overlooked about the FFRDCs is you can, for short period of time, pull in technical expertise to be butts in seats also. So just another thought. Thank you.
Yeah. And for that effort, under Mr. Coleman's direction, we changed a contract vehicle for aerospace from a form that used to be other transaction agreements, which didn't give the FAA yet the opportunity to work very closely with aerospace as an FRDC, but now we recently changed the contract vehicle to a non-sponsor FRDC, and the contract was awarded with the opportunity to work more with aerospace in an integrated manner, similar to how FRDC should be operating.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those comments. So I think I'm going to just skim through these first two slides because it's somewhat repetitive based on the conversation we just had and Kelvin's comments this morning. So essentially, on the topic of AST workforce, COMSTAC was asked to provide some recommendations on how to strengthen the workforce and also how to help continue current employees' technical knowledge base. Next slide. So as the launch cadence continues to increase, it's essentially, it's really important that the federal government plays an increasingly important role through having very competent, dependent staff to execute on the regulatory practices that the industry depends on. So we provided several recommendations on how to strengthen these hiring practices and maintain the technical expertise of the current staff. Next slide. All right, so on a couple of the observations here, I noticed a typo on bullet 3, so I'll make sure that's corrected in the white paper. So first and foremost, the COMSTAC members themselves have experienced the importance of having very knowledgeable and competent staff within FAAST and provided some recommendations on increasing the technical capability piece. Growing and retaining the workforce is essential to maintaining sound licensing practices. As we all know and mentioned before, AST employees must continue to meet with key people at all levels of the commercial space industry. And commercial space launch and reentry operators and commercial spaceports often have low visibility into the AST environment. Next slide. So we'll get into these recommendations, and what I'll do at the end of each, so there are 4 total groups of recommendations, and I grouped these in the way that makes sense to me based on the comments you all provided for the white paper, but I'm happy to rearrange or expand on any of these as you all see fit. So for recommendation 1, it is more direct AST employee engagement with industry. So this kind of speaks a little bit more to the existing employees' technical knowledge base piece. So first one here is develop an education with industry rotation program that would allow selected individuals to be assigned to and work for an aerospace company for several months. The second one here, provide a travel budget for employees to travel to and conduct more on-site meetings with operators. And the third one here, send key employees to lunch and learn events with operators and industry associations. So happy to expand on this, make changes, add to this, or just generally have a discussion. Do you feel like COMSTAC has provided the right recommendations on this particular topic?
Yeah, why don't I ask you, Kevin, do you all is there a current program where employees can go, work in industry? So DoD has specific statutory authority to do that. NASA's been talking about that for some time, so it's actually something they're seeking statutory authority to do. I don't know if that's something that you thought about or you think would be a useful tool.
We currently, We currently do not have an exchange program between sharing staff either on a permanent or ad hoc temporary basis with industry and companies. It's an interesting topic. We can certainly look into exploring more on various fronts, ensuring that the program serves the needs of, within the industry as well as the government, and making sure that we clear through ethics, especially on how we design the program. So I think it's an interesting concept. We do have, a number of internship programs at the FAA where we try to build a pipeline. So as I shared before, in terms of our recruitment retention programs, we have immediate term that we try to address, immediate needs that we try to address right away, bring the right people on board to work right away. We also try to build pipelines along the way, and pipelines would be thought of as either near term or longer term. Near term would be attracting universities that when they finish, that they would consider coming and working and pulling the talent right away. And then, getting into high school for attracting the STEM folks at the high school level to prepare them that they have a space in space when they graduate college. And so for STEM, for internship programs, we have a internship program at the FAA that we leverage quite a bit, and we hire people into AST, giving them the opportunity to work during the summertime. And when the opportunity comes that so it's only mainly for summer times, but then if the opportunity comes for us to see talent development that we can pick them up after they graduate, we extend their term for longer than summer, and then when they graduate, they have a place in AST, and there have been a number of successes for that particular situation that happened in AST.
How many interns did you have this year or last year?
I don't have the exact number. I would say somewhere in the order of between 4 to 8 interns.
And where are you pulling them from?
We have a internship program at the FAA. They do the entire screening recruitment effort, and then once they have all the candidate pool in place, then they would offer that list with their credentials and experience to different lines of business, and then we get to select as to which interns would like to work for us. So that's how we get them.
So essentially, you're leveraging big FAA processes, but AST does not have its own specific kind of more direct process or more direct tie to maybe some aerospace engineering schools, for example, Embry-Riddle, things like that.
We don't have anything formally in place. We have some informal relationships that we leverage and utilize, but we don't have a informal relationships with these institutions.
And do you find that when you're provided with a list of potential interns the FAA may want to recruit, are your choices on that list near the top, or are you kind of subjugated to other agencies within the FAA?
Well, we would select them based on our preferences, and then we would look into their availability. At the same time, we look into they give the students the opportunity to see which areas they would like to work in as well. So it's a sort of like a pseudo negotiation to see whether the interest will match with the needs.
And to that question, to that point, do you find enough students that you can select from that have an interest in commercial space versus aviation?
Okay, so I think I can answer that question with my background being 20 years in aviation. That space is certainly an area that a lot of students are really interested in. Just a personal anecdote: I've worked with aviation for 20 years. Hard to get my 2 sons interested in aviation. All they said was, the body of the airplane just get bigger and bigger, and that's pretty much about it. But the moment I told them that I joined the Office of Commercial Space, they got excited and their eyes blazed. So that was pretty exciting. So certainly, space has more has more things to offer and excitement to offer than aviation. Of course, in aviation, there are other areas like advanced air mobility, supersonic, and UAS that are kind of new areas into aviation. But certainly, space has more interesting things to offer.
So a comment, I think those internship programs are good, and I think they're working, but there's maybe small scale, and it's some of it sort of a roll the dice. I hope we get good people. I think you could take it to the next level by doing things that I know NASA has done successfully over the years, which is instead of just a summer internship, actually have a co-op program, recognizing that degree programs are getting longer and people have different interests. And so by going to class one quarter and then working for one quarter, that type of thing, you can get a real good chance to see what they can do and get them motivated and engaged, and basically have, if not a guarantee, at least a high probability that when they complete their degree, they can, I know you have direct hire, but I mean, it basically would be more of a pipeline. Okay, this person from this school in this program, they've already had experience and we know what we're getting, and it just happens, instead of, I hope we can get that person out of this group. So again, NASA Johnson Space Center especially has done that very successfully. It's a win-win, I think, for the student, for the university, and for the government agency. So if there's interest and opportunity to look at taking it up to that level, I think that might be worth researching.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer. Yes, we've talked about it. I already directed my team to allocate some budget to start small, but if success comes, then we build bigger for 2025. So that effort you're describing, we're trying out a pilot program in 2025 when we have the enacted appropriations. Along with that is, start out with university and then getting into influencing the university curriculum along the way, as Mr. Coleman highlighted earlier this morning. So that's our path forward.
Well, that's a great idea, George. I mean, something we certainly was go take a look at. What I am interested in is working with interns with the idea that they'll eventually come work for us. That's the idea. Work with interns, train them, touch how we do things, and eventually, when the time comes, when they're ready to enter to work for us, they will come work for us. That's the aim. I love to develop folks for, looking nice and develop folks for some companies, but I really need them for us.
Is there like to that point, I mean, have you all considered doing like student loan debt forgiveness in exchange for a commitment to the FAA for 2 to 5 years or something like that?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that workable within your current authorities, or?
Yes.
But you would need budget for that.
We would need budget for that, yes.
So that's a tangible recommendation.
Right.
Just out of curiosity, to what extent are you, what are the requirements, the academic requirements that you're looking for? Are you just focused on aerospace engineering, or is it a broader aperture to look at basic talent? Because I keep thinking back just from years ago at the game development community in Florida. We would always refer to a quote by Elon Musk that said the talent he most wanted was game development because it brought a skill set that could be applied in a host of areas. I'm just wondering how wide is your aperture? Because if you're just looking at aerospace engineering, you're kind of narrowing perspective, and that would seem to have an adverse impact on safety and performance.
I think it's engineers and scientists in general. Even though we do know in advance that eventually we'll focus more on aerospace engineering. We discuss a lot about work activities for aerospace engineers, folks that are in memories organization doing licensing activities. But to enable that to happen, there are activities in terms of research activities, that reside in my organization, software engineering activities, software engineering expertise that we need to build the, and IT as well, to build the licensing electronic portal lead tool that Mr. Coleman highlighted. So it's a broad area with a focus mainly on engineering and scientists. But we do know that our focus eventually will be aerospace.
Maybe I'm going to just add to that. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael, and I'm an intelligence deputy. A couple of conversations have been occurring about degrees in operations. So, for example, Embry-Riddle has a space program. It's not engineers that they're putting out. They're putting out folks with master's degrees in space ops, things like that. So we're looking at, do we need to have engineering for all of our employees? Yes, probably not. Number one. Number two, do we need to have a degree at all for some of the job, i.e. inspector, right? I think that if, so we're looking at the idea of somebody who's going to be, kicking the tires or slapping the side of a rocket. Do they need an engineering degree to do that? And the answer is probably no. If they have background in manufacturing or in trades or things like that, which is beneficial to getting the right kind of people in, and not limiting just to aerospace engineers. So we've been having that conversation with our folks in HR, with industry. We've been talking to colleges about this too, especially ones that offer the degrees that aren't engineering per se, to see if we can open the aperture for those students as well. So it's not just engineering.
This is a fantastic say. Maybe Karina, I think we got a couple folks on there too. Maybe Karina, maybe just if you could quickly maybe run through the list, because I think it's a lot of these ideas in here, and I don't think there's any controversial in there. And then it reflects well, I think, on the broad discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let me just go through the rest of the recommendations, and then General Mercer, Karen, I know you've been waiting patiently, but I don't want to be in a situation where we're repeating a lot of things, because we covered a lot of this within the recommendations, the discussion that's taking place now. So if we can go to recommendation 2, this speaks a little bit more to engaging employees within AST that are currently there. So things like developing employee rotation programs that would allow employees to work in several different parts of AST after being hired, just so they can become a little bit more familiar with all of the processes within AST, empower employees to be involved in decisions. This is kind of speaks to, rather than being sort of like having siloed departments, where, you've got one person in charge. If the employees that are involved in the licensing process can be involved in the decision-making process, it just helps them to learn and grow. Creating a more inclusive atmosphere where employees feel they're part of the solution to regulatory concerns, establishing onboarding and annual training programs to assist new employees with understanding the rationale and intent of licensing. And I think the operators can speak a little bit more to that as necessary. Inspire employees to have more influence over their career paths. Supporting AST employee engagement with research activities, such as the recommended initiative for the Commercial Spaceflight Research Alliance. If we could go to number 3. My intent here is to give you guys a little bit more in terms of like ideas of what the whole group was thinking about. And this I'm hoping will make our whole discussion a little bit more efficient, because I know we're going to be pretty short on time today. So increasing involvement with conferences to improve employees' knowledge base and inspire networking. AST should consider sending employees to commercial space conferences such as AIAA Ascend, Space Symposium, SpaceCom. Encourage AST employees to become members of and regularly participate in professional societies such as AIAA. And then number 4, this seems to be where a lot of the ideas are coming from, is improving partnerships with universities, associations, and fellowship programs. Establish formal relationships with trusted universities to provide a guaranteed number of open positions and expediting hiring authorities. So this is something you all have a lot of ideas about. Significantly increase the internship program as a way of starting the recruiting process before graduation. Partner with industry groups or associations to support activities for aerospace students. partner with local universities to offer on-site technical and other courses or degree programs, which you all have been talking about already, and commit to regularly sending employees to the International Space University Summer Session Program. This one was specifically called out. We don't necessarily need to be that specific in our recommendations, but I did want to keep it in here because it was a very specific comment submitted by someone when putting the white paper together. So this is all the 4 recommendations, and this is how we group them according to these categories. And I think what we'll do is just continue the discussion with all of this now out in the open. And I will call on General Mercer next.
Thank you, Karina Dries, for an opportunity to talk. I was, my original comment had to do with recommendation number 1. The first bullet in recommendation number 1, I would extend that EWE rotation program to your spaceports, not just to aerospace companies, but to your spaceports. I would submit that there are many that really don't know how spaceports work, the challenges they truly face on a day in and day out basis, and particularly the vertical spaceports where most of your lift is occurring in terms of the percentage of lift in the country. But I would say all spaceports, include that in the EWE industry program so that the folks in AST actually understand and see firsthand the challenges and day-to-day operations of your spaceports. I think that will go a long way in helping in the licensing process and understanding the challenges that they face with other federal agencies or entities.
Okay. That's great. I added that to the white paper, so that'll be in there as an edit to the white paper when we recirculate that for consensus. So thanks so much for that, General Mercer. Karen?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to highlight 2 points. One is, the opportunities that exist with the Brooke Owens and the Patty Grace Smith fellowships as, ways that we can take advantage of efforts that already vet students and engage with students that could then be fellows at FAA-AST. And one of the things that we see with our fellows, as somebody who's on the board of the Brooke Owens Fellowship, is that they're often receiving offers if they're at that point in their undergraduate education, right? So if they're coming in as a rising senior, many of them, even some rising juniors, are seeing offers as a result. So making sure that that process allows for the offer because they're very interested usually in having that. And so it's a good way to capture them going into as they finish out their college career. And then the other one is the curriculum. I certainly hear from a lot of universities and types of and colleges that are interested in understanding what they could do to help solve this problem and be a part of the aerospace, engineering ecosystem. And if to the extent that they know that there are government roles and that, when we talk about things like the ability to do flight safety analysis and the challenges that come with licensing spaceflight activities, they're very interested in some specific feedback on what kind of curriculum they could implement to address that. And that seems like that also ties to the training, right? So to the extent that there are trainings that were, that as part of the recommendations, like the training that would be available to new hires, that same training should be some modules that might also be able to be shareable with education institutions that are trying to implement curriculum that would then feed into, ready to go employees. And it's not just employees for the FAA, right? To Kelvin's comments, to Congress, to industry, first thing this morning, the ability to produce documentation that is high quality documentation means that we need people that are capable of doing this both in companies and in the FAA so that you have a virtuous feedback loop. And so that curriculum would support, all of industry as well as the government entities that have to implement and oversee things like flight safety analysis. So thanks for the opportunity to make those comments.
One other follow-on question. How do we, on this recommendation, how do you define trusted universities versus an untrusted university?
Any school from the state of Virginia, Ted.
Okay, well, I don't know what we mean by that.
Yeah, I also wonder if it's a formal relationship is really what is necessary there versus, relationships and having, clear criteria and that kind of feedback loop with regard to what like curriculum would be to support the students, and then have, that be a situation where if students go through that curriculum, there's a higher likelihood that they would be a good candidate for a role.
I think Julie, I think
Yep, thanks. Well, I had a career in space thanks to being an 855 electronics engineer intern. So I can tout the benefits of being in a federal intern program. One thing that we haven't talked about is pay. And I wonder if the FAA should look at the special rate tables for the engineering talent they need to recruit and retain, and examine whether or not pay is a factor in your goals.
I can tell you already it is.
I expected that answer, but I think it's a timely thing to re-examine is the special pay rates for engineers.
Is it just pay though? Because I happen to have quite a bit of really smart friends that are choosing to take less pay to have better work life balance.
Well, if you can give Kelvin.
Please.
But
Jay, sorry, what were you saying? They're taking less pay for what? Better?
choose to have better work-life balance. So,
Send them our way.
sorry, what's the?
I guess, just to be clear, what you're saying there is that better work-life balance relative to working for the FAA? Or,
Just anybody.
Just anybody.
okay,
Like
So-
weekends off.
yeah, so there's
Yeah,
other
I mean,
factors
weekends
that
off.
consider.
I can tell you that I didn't have.
What's that one?
Yeah. Was just trying to probe it. I guess, I think you do raise a good question, which is like, what is it that, when we think about like where someone here, if a graduate's coming out of college and they have decisions to make, why are they choosing to make certain decisions to go to SpaceX or, to go to Blue, to go to some of these other organizations as opposed to the FAA? And I think there's those elements out there, work-life balance, pay. What is it that the FAA has to offer that sets itself apart from those other folks that they're competing for talent, whether it's pay or work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, so the point that I was gonna make is that work-life balance isn't just about working less hours, but it's about aligning, like everybody has a different way that they find fulfillment. And so, to the extent that, I don't know if it's so highlighted, FAA's critical role in the commercial space industry. I think there's a lot of commercial companies that have cool, videos of the missions that they're accomplishing and things like that. But none of that stuff would be possible without safe space flight. So first, I think contextualizing that would attract a select number of engineers that are coming out of school that find that really compelling. And then also people who are aligned with those types of missions are going to want certain types of lifestyle. And so really clearly identifying what that is and then being able to offer that, I think is really helpful. Another bit that I might add to that is I think folks who like to focus on regulatory compliance or rulemaking or things like that, they're typically knowledge hungry. And I can speak as a millennial and having younger employees, they tend to be very like passive learners. Whereas when I was at NASA, I had to kind of be active and engage and approach my branch chiefs who were really intimidating. And that's how I learned. That doesn't really work well. So does FAA have like an internal wiki or like a knowledge base where, like whatever the seniority level is, if it's entry to mid-level, they might really want to just go to an internal wiki and just go down the rabbit hole and just click. And a lot of times, they'll do that outside of work that would be like super easy to code. Because there's like templates out there already.
An internal wiki.
Yeah, so it's at Avon, we have an internal Wikipedia that you can log into, and we have, I mean, it's just like the public Wikipedia, except it's just Avon specific. And you can just go down the rabbit hole, just follow links. And we found
To
that.
learn what you guys do.
Yeah, and all of the knowledge that's required, and then we have like a comment section where folks can comment. And it's like almost like Reddit. It's really weird for me to talk about such a formal. But I mean, I'm just trying to be real that like if we want to engage, then that's kind of what it's gonna take, because then people can read the thread, read the comments. I'll just add a little context to that. Like for us, it was really I keep hearing from HR that there's imposter syndrome, which is like a real thing. Evidently, I'm not sure that I quite understand it, but the way that I kind of understood it when I internalized it is that you like feel underqualified or something like that. And I think the best way to kind of dispel that is to make it's through transparency. And I think a knowledge base kind of accomplishes that. And I think when people don't have imposter syndrome, they feel way more engaged and fulfilled at work. They want to stay, so that helps with retention. And so knowledge base, like internal wiki, would be. And then I think it would also save a lot of time for the senior engineers, because they don't have to keep answering the same question. You can link papers and additional resources, cite them. It's searchable, because we found that a lot of our early employees would go to Google, and then it's like, well, we can do better than Google, so let's start our own.
I have a question on a different topic or a different relation, and it's not just for AST, but for the folks in the room. Can AST be viewed as an entry into the industry, i.e. someone coming out of college who really wants to learn about commercial space, particularly what it takes to get a vehicle, despite all the regulatory restrictions of licensing, to spend a couple of years here at AST before then going out and they're thus be more valuable to the industry. Is that of interest, and is that something that the FAA could do as far as you're trying to recruit new hires? That doesn't help with retention. Once you get them, you hang on to them, but as far as bringing them on board, that, because we see that definitely saw that in DOD, you see that in other government agencies. People go to work for the government to learn about the industry, and that they're more valuable to the industry after 3 to 5 years.
I think in our recruitment campaigns, we certainly try to tout the wonders of this industry and how exciting it is. An opportunity to get engaged via AST FAA is a way to become involved in something very exciting. So in some ways, we sort of do that.
Now, I could go beyond a way to the way. The way to learn faster and get more engaged on a broader scale. You're not looking at just one company, one solution. You're looking at all the space and space. Just thought.
Yeah, it's something I think about. I think that would take some agreement from a broad group of stakeholders that we all agree, or a lot of folks agree, that AST is the entree or the avenue through which people who are looking to get involved in this industry for the first time. That's the avenue that you take the avenue.
They're your competitors.
Yeah, no. Sure. We're all in the same fishbowl, trying to get the same talent.
I've seen certain things out of AST about looking into other agencies, employees, right, sort of some of the knowledge bases that are in other agencies. Are you all encountering any difficult, is that something where statutory change or, you know, something from Congress would be more helpful in your ability to tap those other resources across the government?
I want to be very careful here. I think we see resources in other places in government. We ask ourselves the question, well, why are those resources there? I won't get more specific than that. And why aren't those resources assigned to us, given the responsibilities that we have under Title 50? We're responsible for public safety. We do flight safety analysis. We're responsible. You see staffing in other places where, question, do they need those people? Would those people be better served working for us? And would that clean up some of the concern I think General Mercer was really hitting on this one, which is duplication of effort. So I'll say that's something we're pondering. To your question, Congress be helpful in that arena. Perhaps, maybe. But it's delicate. Sure. Very delicate.
Yep.
Very delicate.
Sure, understood. Excellent. Other comments on folks online or questions? Thank you, Nicole. This is very helpful, right? I think just to have rather than this being kind of a one-way discussion, I think to get some feedback and sort of your own thoughts on this in this important area. I don't know, Karina, thoughts on sort of where do we go from here? I know that there's a lot here. We just got a whole bunch of ideas around the table. I think something we've done in the past, and I don't know if there's room to do this, is you take the discussion, turn that into a white paper that we then circulate versus kind of voting on these particular bullets. But I mean, I don't know if sort of the discussions led you to a different place.
No, I'm happy to do that unless someone felt strongly that we ought to vote on what's been presented here. So I took some notes. I have not captured it all. I apologize, but I tried to capture as much as I could. And what I'll do is go back and revise the white paper. I'll circulate a version 3. I don't really know. I mean, I don't know that I've ever done like a vote, I guess, on a set of recommendations outside of the meeting. And the challenge that we have right now is that we're going to term out October 5th or so. So whatever it is we do outside of the meeting, we will have to make sure we complete, I think, by that date. Brian, do you know what that date is?
We do something post second, or is that was there a hard date by which?
I don't actually know.
I'd have to get back to you on that question because
Okay.
the letters that you've received, I guess your membership expires October 7th, 2024.
Yeah.
So I have to get clarity on if.
Hey, Karina Dries.
Mhm.
Yeah, Ted here. If you feel that you have to go back and do a white paper, then by all means. But what I'm thinking, based on the discussions today, why don't you just go and modify the recommendations with the feedback from today, and then send the recommendations out for comment or adjustment, and then vote on those.
Yeah, we could. I do feel like the recommendations kind of cover a lot of these things, but what folks discussed today is just provides a lot more detail and a lot more specifics. And frankly, I think that's what ASC is looking for. They're looking for specific recommendations on some of these practices. I don't know if I'll have time to do that because I know we've got a lot to continue getting through. And I don't want to pause and do this now. So I could maybe try to work with folks on Brian's team while we continue with the meeting, if you want to try to do that, and then come back and take a vote.
Yeah. 1 second, Karina. Can we take a look at the recommendation 1, 2, 3, 4? Can we start back at rec 1?
Right, or, you know, look, to that theory as well, I mean, if there's comfort here in the room, we could certainly vote on these recommendations and knowing that, so the ideas captured in the discussion will be, you know, the more detailed things will be captured in a paper provided to AST, so that's everyone's comfortable with that. Yeah. All right, do we want to make a motion to accept the recommendations, providing further detail, to capture the discussion in the white paper?
Second.
All right, well, I think we have a way forward. All right, so I'm gonna wait till Brian.
And you all will still have a chance to comment on the white paper when I recirculate that version, but just try to do it before whatever that date is, October 6th or so, just to make sure we can still technically submit it.
Excellent. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna move forward, vote to accept the recommendations of task 2 with the understanding that the further details that was captured here will be added to the white paper, which will then be circulated, you know, and then folks can have a chance to add changes there. So with that, let me go through the list here. Karina?
Yes.
Matt? Dennis? John? Alvin? John?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Mike, yes. Dale?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
General Mercer?
Concur as amended.
Mike Moses?
I vote yes.
Dr. Neal? Yes. Dr. Parker?
Yes.
Melanie?
Yes.
Karen? Cheryl?
Yes. Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And Ann? Angela. All right, excellent. All right, the ayes have it. And with that, we'll thank you all. Really great discussion. And really, again, Min, Kelvin, Brian, thanks for setting that up. Really, this discussion. We just need much more interesting tasks. So excellent, thank you. So with that, Brian, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you, Karina. It was that FA cafeteria.
We can jump to the next slide.
Nobody's interested in
Yeah. The COMSTAC recommendations. This is, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so here's our traditional breakdown. So for everyone's awareness, we are tracking COMSTAC recommendations and we are working to address those as we receive them. So what we have going back to 2018 to the present, we have over 110 recommendations in our basket. They're split between internal processes, you need to fix AST internal processes, rulemaking, and then external guidance on how to apply to the rules. So we have it broken down about 51% for guidance, so that's a big one there. And the recommendation status, so about 9% we've not implemented due to various reasons. And we've implemented almost half of the 110, and we're working another 35%. You'll hear from Randy in a second about a lot of those that we're working on right now. We talked Smart 450 here, that covers a lot. Partially implemented is about 15%, so that means we didn't quite 100% meet the intent of the recommendation, but we did work it to closure in some degree. So with that high level overview, pass it off to Mr. Randy Repchek to work us through our recent updates to recent recommendations.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'm going to the next slide. So I have, there's about 9 slides of recommendations and responses. Some from April 2024 and some from May 2023. And then I have a few slides at the end of all this that talks about advisory circulars. So the first one here is about infrastructure funding. And as you said, that update the space transportation infrastructure matching grant program by changing the maximum federal share from 2% to 9%.
and by deleting the requirement for a 10% private sector match. It also says to increase the program funding level to $100 million a year and prioritize grant awards based on project benefits to the National Spaceport Network in terms of safety, capacity, efficiency, and resiliency. I think what we have done, so we have gone to the Hill, and we've kind of showed how our grant program compares to other DOT grant programs. And ours is quite different. It's based on that the share of the federal share versus others. And so we've talked about that. We've also got a number of technical assistance requests from Congress, and we give the same information, right? That here's how our STEM grant program compares to other DOT programs as far as federal share. So, as we have that now, there's also our National Spaceport Interagency Working Group that's talking about a lot of different things about spaceports, but infrastructure funding is definitely one of those topics on that group. Okay.
Quick question. The parent, we sent this recommendation earlier this year, and you're talking about what was done a year ago. So has there been additional discussions with Congress and others since the recommendation was made in April?
So we've had technical assistance requests from Congress. Like I said, a lot of the work is being done in the interagency working group.
So before you move on, any prediction or status on when or if work from the interagency working group will be made public? Because again, that's sort of the answer. Oh, we're working on that, we're thinking about it, we're talking about it, but none of us have any.
I think you probably have a good answer.
Yeah, so I'll answer two questions. One before was what have we done? It takes an act of Congress to change the language, and so we received technical assistance. Like Randy said, we've been providing off technical assistance based on specific proposed legislations from member of Congress. I'll just leave it as that. On the when do the recommendations from the interagency working group be coming out? We've been working very closely with the White House as well as OMB to go through a process to formally coordinate the recommendations across all the government agencies participating at the highest level that it deserves the attention of the senior leadership team. Mr. Kelvin Colvin has shared at the executive level as to with his colleagues at his level across the Department of Agencies participating, but I think a number of recommendations do have implications, regarding potential policy changes or updates as well as legislations or policies. So it deserves attention at the level that it needs to. And that's why OMB examiners OMB has offered the opportunity to do a formal coordination and vetting with other agencies. So that could be what I'm really using. So we're giving them the report that they need, and they're helping us with coordination.
To just add a little bit, Min explained about this, amplify a little bit what he just said. Keep in mind, the interagency working group was something that we voluntarily started. We brought in the interagency partners. There has been a lot of work done to bring to bear, run to the table a number of recommendations that have implications for a number of agencies. So that work has been done. Now what we're in the process of doing is getting a stamp of approval on that, where the government is saying we stand behind these recommendations, meaning DepSec level, we all agree. We have agreement at middle executive level, if you will, across the agency, but we're trying to leverage the OMB LRM process to get this in front of higher level leadership throughout government, see what the recommendations are to get that stamp on it. Then we know we have a set of recommendations that the government stands behind. Once we get that, then we will be more public with what we recommend. So we're really trying to get this to be something that is really something, if that makes sense. Some recommendations that are solid, that transportation, DOD, state, commerce, NASA, we all stand behind and say, yeah, these are the recommendations we'll move forward with. So that's the process that we're now engaged in, is getting that stamp.
Estimated timeline?
I don't have a good estimated timeline to tell you that.
We've been waiting for a while anyway, so that's.
Yeah. I don't have a good stamp. I'll tell you what we're doing now. We have a group of recommendations. We don't have a report that encapsulates these recommendations. So what we're doing now is putting these recommendations into a form, i.e. a report that can be vetted throughout the interagency process, throughout the LRN process, OMB administers. So we're doing that work right now. That's staff doing it when they can.
No, it ain't easy.
No, it's not. So difficult to say exactly when, but I will say the good news is you have support at certain levels across government, what we have. So we got good momentum. We have briefed what we have to OMB. We briefed OMB the process that we want to pursue, that we just talked about. There is support to do that. So there is momentum. We are moving forward, albeit a little slow, but we are moving forward.
So just to put a fine point on that, I believe the charter for that group, which took a while to get to, was signed in June of 2022. So that's more than 2 years ago, and there's nothing that has been released yet. So that, again, if urgency, it matters, if competition with other countries and all that matters, that's pretty slow. So just an observation.
Fair enough.
Okay, next one. This is about space nuclear systems, about the EAC we put out. So the recommendation was to, of course, to explore with NRC, DOE, and the rest of the interagency, which agency has the authority for licensing the operation of space nuclear systems when they're in space. And also the FAA should develop a strong collaborative relationship with the NRC. So our response to this is, first of all, we're a member of the Interagency Nuclear Safety Review Board, the INSERV, which is the government group that will now review the launch of space nuclear systems for government payloads and some commercial payloads. So all the agencies that are involved with nuclear are part of that board, and so are we. And there's also an informal group that NASA put together, and has all the agencies put together, where we talk about who has authority for what, where's the interface, how's it going to work in real life, right? So we're trying to work all those kinks out of the system with all these different agencies involved with nuclear, who does what. And so there's those two groups that are pretty actively engaged in that topic right now. And the third recommendation here is the FAA should address challenges with procuring insurance for launches of space nuclear systems. And I guess, as Brian will bounce this back with ask for clarification. We're not exactly sure what we were asked to do here. Obviously, we determine insurance levels for licenses. We don't usually get involved with how it's procured, but thanks for asking for clarification.
So Randy, on the first one, has the question of is the topic of authority for licensing operations space nuclear systems a topic of conversation in the group that you mentioned? You say there's that group, but that's different than whether you're actually talking about this.
Okay, so I'm assuming it is. I'm not actively engaged with that group, but all different interfaces are. Now, for space nuclear systems, obviously, if it's a payload, this otherwise either owned by the government or licensed by the FCC or NOAA, we would have once it's in space, we would have no authority. The only time we would get involved with anything that's going to be operated in space is if no other agency regulates that payload. We have our payload review process where we can stop the launch of a payload if there's a concern about public health and safety, security, property, the necessary and foreign policy interests of the United States. So it's pretty clear how that works, but it comes down to individual payloads. And as you know, obviously, no one has full authority for on-orbit activities. We still have our payload review authority.
To answer the question some more, we did last April. It looked like the assumption was that we had not coordinated with INSERT at all on the AC before we posted, so it was right around the meeting, April meeting. But we did coordinate it, so we were working with them actively. They helped a lot, the development of the AC, so good knowledge for that.
Oh, absolutely, no, that AC was put, every agency had a comment.
Thank you. What's the process for determining like the NPL for like a nuclear payload launch? Would it just hit the cap?
Well, that's a great, so, so we have we can only require insurance up to $100 million for government property, $500 million for third party. And yeah, there's definitely maybe for some of these bigger systems, that you'll hit that $500 million pretty quick. But that's the cap we have. So, that's, I think we mentioned that in the AC, maybe not, but the process is the same, but the number will be different. Okay. Oh, just back to still on space nuclear systems. Next slide. The FAA should adopt a framework for finalizing space nuclear system payload review ahead of launch or reentry licensing. So the way our process works, so for most payloads that are launched, the launch operator provides the FAA the information about the payloads. And for your average run-of-the-mill payloads, it's not a big deal. For space nuclear systems, we don't require the owner or operator of that system to come into us directly for payload review, but it is encouraged. And in fact, we already have a number of payload operators that come to us for payload reviews for space nuclear systems. Because for something that complex, it's best to be handled kind of separately. But it's not required, but it's definitely an option under Part 450. And second one here is the FAA should allow for the launch of radioactive materials in small quantities without requiring overly burdensome safety analysis. This could yield valuable insights without increasing public risk. So, officially, in Part 450, the way we handle space nuclear system launches, it's officially on a case-by-case basis. That's kind of how we wrote it in Part 450, because we didn't have enough information at the time we wrote Part 450 to have any kind of detailed requirements for space nuclear systems. And so ideally, if it's a low risk, it'd be low requirements. The AC is certainly written that way. The AC is meant to be scalable to the risk. And so as we start working these, our task is to ensure that if it's a relatively low risk, and a lot of these things are, right? Small batteries, some of these small heaters, that kind of thing, they're relatively small compared to, say, a space nuclear reactor in space. So we try to scale the risk analysis based on what we're looking at. Okay, next slide.
Is there a, have you all thought about a minimum threshold for small systems that wouldn't trigger further review?
It's certainly worth talking about. Like our AC does not cover, we have 3 tiers. And I don't think we have a minimum like that where it's like almost like de minimis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's worth talking about for sure.
And I think just to chime in, because having worked on that, that's essentially what that last recommendation is, the point of it was, right?
Okay.
It's not just like, so the answer that, that there's not a burdensome, it's that there should be some clarity around that with some definition or some guidance on what that, de minimis or, minimal amount would be that could make this a non-burdensome amount of information required. So more clarity there would certainly be helpful.
That's a fair comment. I think we'll get back. I think so the idea would be, at least at this point, update the advisory circular with some kind of de minimis threshold. Right? That's the kind of recommendation.
Yes, that would be helpful as a start.
That's fair.
Do folks have an idea as to what that should be? is that for us to go off and research?
The recommendations in the SNS report, I guess I'll call it, included some examples. And I think that's the challenge is that of things that are transported in aviation. It's I think would it be correct, and this was part of our conversation at the last COMSTAC, to just say, well, if it's already been reviewed and safe for aviation, it's then safe for space. I have no ability to say that that is the correct way of approaching it, right? We talked about the challenges with approaching something like that, that if it's good for one, it's good for another. That said, if there's some, means of guidance as a result of experience with, the materials that could give that indication, that would certainly be helpful. And I think engagement, engagement with the community that is thinking hard about these payloads certainly could yield some recommendations there. And, we heard earlier ASTM, has been thinking about this topic as well. So I think if there's an interest in getting that specific, feedback and engaging meaningfully with the industry the part of the industry that is working hard on that question, I think you could probably yield some results or some suggestions there.
Sure.
Okay, we have a slide on recommendation on Part 450 solutions. So the first one is the FAA should reinvigorate its efforts to publish advisory circulars that address aspects of the Part 450 regulations. So I have a couple slides later on specifically on ACs. But the basic number is we've published 22, and we have about 15 more to go. 2 of which are almost done. But we'll talk about details later. The second one, the FAA should evaluate a change to its policy and regulations to address the significant challenges with its means of compliance review and methodology for flight safety analyses. Obviously, this is a big topic. When we do begin the Part 450 Spark, flight safety analysis methodologies and the idea of the means of compliance, all that will be a big part of that Spark discussion. And so we look forward to that. Of course, in the meantime, we are, Kevin mentioned in his talk, that we are trying to obviously get the ACs done. We have workshops, we have office hours, and we're trying other ideas to try to increase regulatory clarity for applicants. Third recommendation is that the FAA should expeditiously move forward with Part 450 Spark. So that is expected to be signed pretty soon. I don't know if you mentioned this or not, Kevin, but I think we're going to, by the fall, for sure, we'll have the Spark up and running. And we do look forward to getting through that.
I want to say there's a lot of attention on this. Not just from my desk, but from the front office and the agency. Community support to get this thing moved. So folks are attentive to it. People are paying attention. I think folks understand how important it is. So I want everyone here to understand folks are paying attention. So when you say the fall, you're saying it, but that sort of understanding that gives that confidence that we'll have it ready to go.
Okay, the FAA should engage meaningfully and consistently with FAA applicants and parties to define clear goals for regulatory reform. Of course, we agree with that. We engage here for the Spark. The Spark is a big part of this for all of our regulations. I think for all regulations, we'll have a Spark first to get industry involvement. Anyway, we'll see about that.
Well, can I jump in on this one?
Yes.
I think the last time we discussed this, we sort of discussed whether or not AST is engaging with industry during the development process of an advisory circular to get preliminary feedback if it's going to be a workable recommendation.
For ACs?
For ACs.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And, for example, I think you guys just published flight safety methodology AC, flight safety analysis AC of last week, right?
Yeah, we have a couple, yeah.
So we, for example, think there's some some issues with that AC, so we're gonna be kind of post facto providing that information to you and feedback, so we can deal with it on a forward-looking basis. But have you given any additional thought to working with industry prior to publishing?
So our normal method is we develop an AC, we definitely go through what's called the COMSTAC working group, which is a government group. So, and that's how you, so we go through,
Just got excited, man.
I know, so, that's okay, no, I know,
I think you're verifying my point.
So, okay, no, so, yeah, right, so FAA and NASA, so we put it out, now, what we did, I think the first, 5 ACs we did, 450, we did a draft first, got comments, and then put the final out. And the reason we're doing it the way we're doing it now is that it really slows things down, right? So what we're trying to do is, instead of putting drafts out and then finalizing it later, we're putting final ACs out that can be revised later. So it's the same process, really. We do want to hear your feedback, and we do take feedback, and we do revise ACs based on that feedback. And you'll see, when you see the list of what we're doing, half the things we're working on are revisions to ACs, not new ACs. But the thought was that instead of putting a draft out first, just put an AC out, and then as we get comments from the industry, modify it.
Yeah, because ACs aren't rules.
But they're very important
Yeah.
to execution against the rules.
Yeah. No, we really do, we do want feedback, because that's, that's why we have the form in the back, and I think, and so we could, what we did, at least for the first 5, we had a draft down, we gave them like, maybe, I forgot, we gave 2 months, 3 months, maybe to give comments back, and then we did a revision, or did the final AC. It's just so much, it's just so time consuming to do a draft and a final. We're trying to get all these ACs out.
Yeah, I'm not pushing back on that at all. I am curious about a couple of other things, not to wrap us around the AC axle here, but like, have you assessed how the current licenses are utilizing the recommended means of compliance on a particular AC, or are there significant industry deviations from that? To go into your feedback loop as to whether or not these ACs are workable from an industry standpoint. And second question is, ASC is balancing the need to do, I think, 3 things simultaneously. One is license applications and getting them out the door. Second is development of these ACs. And third is review and evaluation of methodologies that are proposed. And all of these things really are of a piece, but they're being dealt with kind of separately. So my question is basically, how are you integrating the work that your team is doing on ACs into like the learning loop of how licenses are being evaluated?
Yeah.
And are the folks working on the ACs the same folks that are analyzing the licenses?
Good question. You want to answer that, or?
Yes, the folks working on the ACs are the same people analyzing licenses.
Okay.
And
so that seems,
but so his
good
motive,
and bad, right?
And I think,
Yes, it is. It's good and bad.
One, that's the problem. That's why they're not all done.
They're seeing what's coming in the applications, and they're gauging, to your point, the degree to which the ACs are currently being used where we have them. At the same time, they are the same people who will be judging the sufficiency of what comes in later and capturing that in the guidance that goes out. So some consistency there in terms of not 2 different groups who might disagree on what good enough looks like. The same people evaluating for good enough are also putting out the guidance for what is good enough.
And I think we have learned from the earlier ACs that what we don't need is a textbook, right? I think our current approach is to, first of all, explain what the rule is, what it means, what it requires, what the level of effort is for that requirement, and then provide examples. Right, so we're trying to, I think we're kind of shifting our focus a bit to hopefully have more helpful ACs as we promote right now. And but they're very, they are hard to get them right, and it's going to take some time. But yeah, that's the problem. Maybe the same folks doing licensing are doing ACs, and that's why we don't have all the ACs out there.
And Matt, once we get the usable portion of ACs on the website. The plan is to have a habit of doing draft AC updates for all, once we get a usable portion out. Right now, the trend, the desire is to get guides out as soon as possible. Always open to comment, and they're easy to change, but having done hundreds of ACs in my career, the best way to do it is put up a draft, get comments in, and recycle and plan to update them on a regular basis so they're fresh. I think that's the goal where we want to get is that point where we're just refreshing and updating on a regular basis. But now it's get them out, and we might get 10 this year, which I think is good, but we got more work to do. And like Dan said, we're changing the tire as the car is racing around the track.
Okay, all right, next slide. Okay, this is the last one from April 2024. It's about the human spaceflight recommended practices. So the first recommendation is that the AC should host a discussion on the scope of what human occupant safety entails before future guideline revisions are released. This could be held within the existing Spark or another forum, but it's recommended that discussion occur after the initial 460 Spark work is complete. So a couple points there. We agree. I mean, so I think the Part 460 Spark is wrapping up. It should be done. We should have recommendations this fall. And at some point in the future after that, we'll try to issue them out to the public. There's been a really lot of good discussions within this Spark, and we're really looking forward to the recommendations. And we've learned quite a bit. The perspective, there's a lot of perspectives that we would not have otherwise thought about ourselves about this Spark. Once we get the recommendations, we're going to kind of relook at what we do next as far as the human spaceflight. And that would include the recommended practice document, what we do with it. And so we'll be ready for it. A lot of it, we want to get the recommendations first from Spark. And then this next one here is until revision or retraction is issued, AST should clarify the intent of the document to guide any use by new and existing interests. So what I put here on the slide was kind of worded right from the recommended practice document. What we said was the intent of the document. So we said that the document is intended to create a dialogue among consensus of government, industry, and academia on practices that will support the continuous improvement of the safety of launches and range vehicles designed to carry humans. The document can also be used to help identify subject areas that could benefit from industry consensus standards. So on the last point, I think Andrew did mention this morning that the ASTM F47 committee is using the recommended practice document to kind of look at different topics to do standards on. And that was a big part of why we did that document. And I will say it's also being used in the 460 Spark because the whole idea was to break down human spaceflight safety into different component parts. And so I think so far the document's been being used as we intended, just to create dialogue. It's not regulatory, has no regulatory impact, but it is being used in these different organizations. And the last recommendation here is the COMSTAC recommends a revision or retraction of the recommended practices for fit. So I don't know about retraction, and I think it's not regulatory in nature. It is being used, and we'll have to decide after the 460 Spark whether we do a revision or not.
Hey, Randy, it's Mike Moses,
Yeah.
from Safety Working Group. So yeah, so those recommendations were kind of couched in almost at the beginning of the year. So, many months ago, that depending on how long it would take for Spark to wrap up, right, that it could potentially lead to some confusion amongst operators or new applicants. So that was the recommendation for the retraction or revision. I totally understand your logic. It's just, it's a document that's full of a lot of things that come from a lot of different areas. If everybody takes it the right way as a guide, that's fine. It was just more of I think this was one where industry, COMSTAC was expecting to be able to have talked to you ahead of time. And so we didn't put a lot of detail into what's actually in the document, but I understand your feedback.
Okay, that's a good point. Well, thank you. Okay.
I would say COMSTAC can talk to us at any time about what's in these recommended practices. And they're just that. They're just recommended practices. If they're of value to somebody, great. If they're of no value, you can say they're of no value and move on. But the COMSTAC at any point in time can come to us and offer inputs as to how we might improve the document. That's up to the COMSTAC to take on if it so desires. But these recommended practices is just what Randy put on board what they're intended for. These recommended practices just didn't come about last year, a couple of years ago. We first published these back in 2013. They've been around for about a decade now. We did an update more recently because we thought the recommendation was warranted. It's a voluntary product that we produce. It is not regulatory in nature. We're not directed to do it from a statutory standpoint. We did it because we wanted to offer up some insights as to what people oftentimes ask us. Well, what are you guys thinking about in terms of doing space flight? What are the recommended practices? What we're thinking about. We can disagree. You can say, hey, you're not thinking about the right things. That's fine. But it does offer what we are thinking about, and it shows areas that we think are important with respect to human spaceflight occupancy. Again, it's just there for anyone's consumption who so desires to make utilization of it, but it's not anything that's required. And again, we are always open to COMSTAC's inputs as to how we might be able to improve it.
Okay, so the next 4 slides, the last 4 are from May of 2023, this recommendation. And so let's see. So the first one's about industry consensus standards. It says, as a safety working group continues to review its recommendation for how voluntary consensus standards can be used as a means compliant with performance-based requirements, initial findings are that in addition to industry standards, means of compliance for future performance-based requirements should include government standards and other unique means of compliance developed by an individual applicant. Couple points here. So there are government standards that are already identified by us as acceptable means of compliance. So in the flight safety system world, RCC 319, RCC 324. So there's a lot of, so those are government standards that are used in means of compliance, and there's a few others in our means of compliance table. So we definitely want to use existing government standards where it makes sense. And we do that. As far as the unique means of compliance, and so we've been talking, so we're talking actually internally here at AST about, I don't know, 4 or 5 different companies have now gone through Part 450 and have licenses. So that means there are a number of unique means of compliance that have been accepted by the we'd love to publish those, but we can't, of course, because they're proprietary and we can't just do that. But we've been trying to talk in some way if as companies experience going through Part 450 and having means of compliance accepted by the FAA, how that gets shared in some way without giving away any kind of proprietary information. So, so we're still thinking about that. I don't know if anyone has any ideas, but it'd be nice if, and maybe that's what ASTM does, right? It puts out standards that's based on industry experience with Part 450. I don't know, but we're trying to think about how to do that.
I think, Randy, since Mike Moses again, I mean, this is, we talked about standards a little bit this morning. This is the, I'll try to keep too much of the frustration out of my voice, right? This is the circular merry-go-round we've been on for years here, right? And it's all, this is human spaceflight, right? This is 460 stuff, not 450 that Safety Working Group was looking at. And back to the idea of, we need to go put 460 out there. We need a spark, we need rulemaking. What's it going to take the form of? And guidance has been, well, are there standards? Are they being complied with? And we just go in a circle around and around. So since I think probably we can just cut this all off, you guys are in the middle of 460. Let's see where that goes. But this is, I think, if I had to sum it up, right, this is probably the frustration of Safety Working Group of the last 2 years of we can't start because we can't start, right? And so we got to go work on standards, but we can't do standards because they're voluntary, but we don't want to do them anywhere else because we need regulation, but the regulation, we don't know where it's going to start. So we probably don't need to jump on that merry-go-round here this afternoon. The 460 sparks in the middle of all that. And so understand it. But I mean, clearly the recommendation back in May wasn't, you should take voluntary standards and make them government compliance. It was what direction is rulemaking for 460 going to take? Is it going to give performance-based? Is it going to be prescriptive? Is it going to use standards as a basis? That's what the basis of this recommendation way back in May was. And I think it's all water under the bridge now with 460.
Yeah, I think, so the answer I gave was really about 450. So I guess if it's more focused on part 460, you're right. I mean, so yeah. So one thing I'll say about it, I think I mentioned this later, is that standards are a discussion point within the Spark, and we'll see what comes out of the Spark. Okay, next slide.
I've got a quick question or comment on that. Is it so important to share the methodologies, or is it the results? So for example, like I know that there's some efforts for safety element approval for flight safety analysis. In that case, the methodology would be public or published, but the tool itself is used as an accepted means of compliance. Right. That way you can abstract the proprietary approach, but still get the end results.
Yeah, and we do have companies coming in and talking to us. We do have some applicants for CP element approvals for flight safety analysis.
I would say both. You would want the tools out there, and you'd also want the methodologies that have been accepted in the past. They would provide a broader reference of options and approaches that were representative of what we found to be acceptable.
But the methodologies is a challenge because of the proprietary nature.
That's right. Yeah, we don't. If an applicant comes in with a unique means of compliance, and we can't share that.
Right.
Have you ever asked the company to do that?
Well, that's what we've been talking about. Is there a way to? We've not. I don't think we've even talked to anybody about whether they'd be willing to release a means of compliance.
If I was a company and I had a way of compliance, part of me would want to release that so that it forces others to follow your method, which has already been approved.
And there's a bit of a prisoner's dilemma where, right, it just helps, especially for spaceflight right now, when it's urging the industry, just to share knowledge makes the industry stronger.
Yeah, it just strikes me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, nothing. I mean, maybe there are some methodologies that are proprietary in nature, but it just seems like that's a pretty easy conversation to have with applicants to see if they're comfortable with. I know we, for example, we're going to be publishing, like the Lux methane methodology in the IASS, for example. So we're very, I think SpaceX is very, just speaking about this, I think we're very eager to share.
Okay, let's go ahead.
I don't want to jump in for any comment.
No, go ahead.
There's nothing stopping any company from sharing right now. Nothing.
Well, I think
you all recognize that this challenge exists. There are at least 6 examples out there that have successfully passed the process. There's nothing from stopping those 6 examples from being shared.
But the point being is, if you're not one of the 6, and you're looking for a means of compliance, if you're not aware of the details of those 6, and you don't even know to go ask them to say if they would release it, whereas the AST does and could say, are you willing to ask? Are you willing to release?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. I think, you're exactly right. There's companies that have cleared the hurdle, and there are companies who are trying to clear the hurdle. And those who are trying to clear the hurdle, offering up an example of what has worked before that might be marked proprietary, but I don't think we have asked the question, hey, SpaceX or wherever it is, hey, would you be willing for us to share what you did with company Y, wherever it may be?
Or just publicly.
Or publicly put it out for everybody's consumption. That's what we've been talking about. We have been trying to crack this nut. We are being very intentional about this. We've met and tried to figure out how do we help companies clear this hurdle. And this is what we talk about. Hey, can we just post something on the webpage? This is what the methodology looks like. This is what it looks like. You get a chance to see it. We run into some obstacles though with proprietary and things like that. But again, the companies can say, well, we're okay with you sharing this. So I think it's something we'll pursue.
Yeah, you have to ask.
Yeah.
I thought we could make an appendix to an AC. Here's an example.
So thinking about small steps, if there's a concern or uncertainty about how that could go, one could at least take a first step that said, the webpage says, the following companies have received approval of their process, you know, and if they have, you don't have to put it out there, but at least people know who to go ask, and if they want to license it or sell it or provide service.
Let's say we have that. We've got 6 licenses on our website, and they wouldn't have been licensed if they didn't get their methodologies approved. It's actually a variety. There's a hybrid, there's a reentry vehicle, there's a reusable vehicle, there's an expendable vehicle. That was pretty good. The cross section of the industry, and all the licenses are on the website.
But you don't need to have a methodology approved to get a license.
You get waived, I guess. That's what you mean.
Yeah, or you could use, I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of methodologies that are being considered that aren't approved, but there are things that are licensed.
You're talking mission by mission approvals?
Not really, but I mean, we can table this discussion.
But there are certain ones that need to be approved that are causing or proven to be high hurdle for some companies. And those wouldn't be the ones we want to focus on. So, to Dan's point, yeah, we have some things on the webpage. Probably put some bright lights on it so folks can kind of see and pay attention to that. And we can do some marketing to help people understand, oh, so-and-so's got one, maybe I should go take a look. So maybe we can probably spruce that up a little bit to enhance the scent so people know what trail to follow to try to get approved.
I think that's an interesting point. The operator to operator or industry to industry data sharing is less of a concern, I think, from an industry to a regulator data sharing. And so we heard that feedback from the lessons learned information system proposal and test last November. And the recommendation from COMSTAC was no, because the data proprietary sensitivity issues, even though we said we would desensitize the data. And we've done it in other avenues in the agency as well. So that's part of our challenge. Even if we did say, yes, you could, if the industry said, yes, we could publish something, we would still have to de-identify in such a manner that it couldn't be traced back to the operator. So we had a challenge, but we asked the COMSTAC and they came back no. So tangential issue to license.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that one though, it was about mishaps. Yeah, I think just sort of the nature of it, or this one maybe. Why didn't we just, you could just ask it. Well, yeah.
Okay. Which is good, it's powerful. I mean, this opens up some ideas for us that we can pursue. So, but this is something we're pressing hard on. We want to help companies who are struggling to get over the hurdle. We're iterating with 5 or 6 occasions. We're cutting it down to 1 or 2 shots. Boom, there you go. Over the hump. So that's what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to figure out ways to do this. So this is been helpful.
Okay, so this next recommendation, these are about spaceflight. First one is the FAA should detail how it analyzes the readiness indicators outlined in the report and provide more thorough substantiation of the agency's findings regarding the industry's readiness. So some history here, back in the CSLCA of 2015, required the FAA to come up with what they call metrics or indicators of the readiness of the industry to have a safety framework that may include regulations. So in 2017, we put out what's called indicators of industry readiness. We've not updated them since then, and that is a discussion point in the floor safety spark. And we do realize that whether the spark does it or whether we do it afterwards, that those indicators from 2017 have to be updated. So we'll definitely be doing something along this line. The second one here is the FAA should continue to encourage efforts to develop consensus standards. I think we heard from Andrew and talked about that already today about our efforts on standards development. And the third one here is the FAA should prioritize update in 2014 recommended practices. What we talked about that already. Next slide. So the FAA should continue collaboration with COMSTAC and industry partners to determine human spaceflight sparks, scope, participants, and pace. And I think this is probably overcome by this. We already have the spark up and running. It'll be hopefully completed pretty soon. And those last two recommendations there are about resources and making sure that the resources we spend on human spaceflight don't interfere with our licensing work. And we're well aware of that. The efforts we put into future human spaceflight work is a very, very small percentage of our resources used in AST.
What is the percentage?
Well, so as far as we have people working human spaceflight, but it's mostly missions that are like Polaris Dawn. I mean, so we do have human spaceflight requirements for current licenses. The only effort we really have going on that's kind of beyond that is that human spaceflight spark. There's a handful of us working it. So I don't have a percentage for you, but it's a relatively low effort.
No one is working on future possible regulations.
No.
Space flight, no one's working on that.
No, we're not.
It's really limited activity, right? I can tell you, none of the analysts are working on human space flight. I think it's also, I know that the inspectors are, or I don't believe, or any of the, maybe one or two on the spark, I don't know. But the folks who are critical to the licensing effort, again, thank you again. They're not working on space flight. I don't know this percentage either. It's something very tiny.
Yeah, I'm just, going back to the 22 total panelists on flight safety and system safety. I wonder is it possible to supplement those numbers with the folks you've got detailed to human spaceflight activities?
Well, like I mentioned, we're going to finish the spark. We're going to get recommendations. Then we're going to decide what to do with human spaceflight after that. But I think it's important to chart our path of what we do want to do in spaceflight.
Who's on the spark from our side?
Myself, Min's the chairman. And there's three of us that are co-chairs of groups.
Who are those three?
Jim Bailey, myself, and Sabrina Jovin.
Sabrina's AGC, Jim Bailey's one of our managers. Who's that first? You?
Yeah.
So we got managers and one AGC first. So again, none of the worker bees, people banking on licenses are there. It's just,
Okay. This is the last slide for matrix here. The FAA should clarify as needed amend Part 450 to address the challenges and requirements that are distinct from launch and reentry. And then the FAA should prioritize Part 450 clarification through guidance and policy balance. But we talked about this. The specific things about launch and reentry, and I know for reentry specifically, there's been some concerns about Part 450. And that, of course, will be a big topic of the spark when we get that going. And the last response here we have there is about ACs. And like I said, we have a total of 22 ACs published and 15 more actively being worked. If we go to the next slide, talk about some of the ACs specifically. So these are the new, these are the ACs that we've worked on this fiscal year. So there's 10 listed there. 8 are new, 2 are revisions. The 2 in bold, the pre-application and the FSA methodology rigor, are not out yet, but they're really close. So they'll probably be done this fiscal year by the end of this month. Probably the most important one there is the FSA methodology rigor. That's a really important one because that's often an issue is what level of rigor are we looking for with our flight safety analyses, and so this AC attempts to answer that question. So we're anxious to get that one out. And then you go to the next slide. That's just the next slide is just the ACs that are, other than those 10 listed in the first slide, there's 14 more that are currently out there that are active. If you go to the next slide, this is my last slide. This is the ACs that we are working on for the next couple of years. About 13 of those are new and 12 of those are revised. So like I mentioned, we try to, as we put more and more ACs out, we realize we need to revise the ones we currently have. So half this semester are revisions to current ACs. But you can see the new ones there. And a lot of these are all flight safety analysis, pretty difficult ACs to write, but pretty critical to get out. So
are these prioritized?
So this list is not prioritized. We do have a priority list. We're gonna actually relook at that again in the next couple of weeks to kind of reprioritize the work. And it's not just what's the most important, it's also who we have to work on these ACs, what they're currently doing with licensing, and who's free to work on these things, right? So, but we're trying to capture as best we can the highest priorities first. Okay. For me, oh, you can, that slide should have been deleted. It's redundant. There actually is one more slide on rulemaking activities. I'll cover this fast. So we have 2 rulemakings, active rulemakings right now. The Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act made some changes to our statute, including the addition of government astronauts. And so we are about to issue that final rule. It's been signed by the administrator and just has to be put in the Federal Register. So it's just a waiting publication in the Federal Register. So that's pretty much done. And then our rule degree rule, we proposed rollout last year. We're working those issues. We're going to try to get that rule out. We're planning to get that rule out probably late spring, early summer of next year. That's kind of the plan for that rule.
Brady, is that rule still within AST or is that an interagency? Will that need to IRA review?
It does need IRA, yeah. It's a significant rule, so it has to go through. But yeah, so we have a while ago. We're still looking at comments. We're still addressing comments.
Thanks. Will you go straight to final, or will there be a supplement?
Well, we put a proposal. The plan is to go to a final.
Well, thank you, Andy. Just and then Brian, for making this part of the concept. It's really important to have the feedback, to get AST to respond to things we look at and provide. And so I just really want to thank you for doing this, over the last several COMSTACs.
One question.
Yeah.
So there was one other recommendation from the April COMSTAC meeting, which had to do with AST moving to report to the secretary. So if there's anything you can share either on discussions, progress, or editorial comment, that would be of interest.
Do we have anything, Brian?
We don't have anything, unfortunately.
I would, Dr. Neal, I would say we took it very seriously, had conversations about it. You being a former ASC1 know the sensitivity of that conversation coming from us up to DOT. But Kevin went out of the room as that question came up. It was a very good one. And here he is.
So thanks for sharing on that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I would say he's going to take care of it.
No, Dr. Neal was asking about the one recommendation about AST being removed from this recommendation, and asked if there was any chatter about that. I basically told him we took that conversation very seriously, but it's very sensitive. Us talking about that to our current location in DOT is a little awkward, but the administrator did get a recommendation as a part of it, so I don't know if you have any more to share.
So first of all, it's that recommendation is one that I think is from different points in time has been on the table a number of times, and I really feel this way about it. It's not for me to advocate to my department or to my agency that they remove the organization that I lead from it and put it somewhere else. I think folks are aware of the recommendation. I think people who are in a position to actually do something about it, I think they're aware of it. I will not advocate for it. That doesn't mean I'm against it. Doesn't mean I'm for it either. This means I won't advocate for it. I won't take action to, well, COMSTAC recommended this, now I'm pushing for removal of the FAA. You will not get that from me, okay? Or anybody on this team. If folks want to ask us questions about it, we're happy to answer questions. So we're here to provide technical assistance for any decision maker who wants to pursue that recommendation. That's the posture that we have. So we're not doing anything. We're more in a passive mode. So if somebody comes to us and wants to talk to us, we'll talk to them. That's the posture.
Again, just the charter of COMSTAC is we're providing advice to the secretary.
Yeah.
So try to do that.
Yeah. And so what we've done is, of course, what we always do is there's a summary of this meeting that gets secretary. So got to push forward.
Next slide. Thank you, Randy. Thank you again.
All right, well, that brings us to the round of table discussions about future COMSTAC taskings. As I mentioned in the opening of the FAA field, it's really important to hear what the industry feels is most important to them, for them to work on, to be tasked with by the FAA, instead of FAA creating taskings in a vacuum. So this is the opportunity where we can just jot notes down. We've got note takers. Start brainstorming lists. So we appreciate any and all feedback. We'll consider that for the next COMSTAC meeting, hopefully by April 25.
Right, just from a process standpoint, for those folks who are rolling off COMSTAC, well, is there someone to task these to, or does that have to, does a full other round of kind of letters have to go out, or does a set of tasks?
So we have to have a membership established. So that means each individual serving on the next COMSTAC will have to receive a letter signed by the Secretary of Transportation. Then we will have a meeting.
It's not like something about continuing. There's another process.
Right.
Understood. Okay.
But that's not to say if everyone in this COMSTAC is off the COMSTAC, that your input isn't valuable.
Sure. I'm just wondering from the tasking time frame. That makes sense.
And the idea behind this is that this is an advisory committee to the Secretary of Transportation to the FAA. We don't see everything, we don't think of everything. You are here because of your unique expert perspectives, broad knowledge of this sector. So we really want to take advantage of your knowledge and expertise. And you may have ideas. Hey, these are things we want to discuss as a committee that we want to provide advice to the FAA on. So this is an opportunity for you. I mean, in the past, it's been a little bit, I'll be frank, I get a little concerned when it's just becomes a situation where we're coming to the COMSTAC with taskings. This is not a working group. There are working groups, I understand that, but it's not, you wait for us, and we go off, look at this thing, look at that thing. But there are ideas here that we may not come up with that you may have. And so that's what we really want to open this up, to, hey, what should we be talking about? What should we be thinking about? That maybe we Didn't come from us, but come from you all. That's really important to the work that you do.
Yeah, I'll just throw one out, just sort of get started here. I think the 450 will, I think will remain an important topic, but certainly will have the spark, ostensibly going. So I don't know if there's aspects of 450 that will be better served in COMSTAC, maybe because of timing. So what I'm thinking about maybe just the COMSTAC refresh sort of the priority of the AC priority. So to the extent the asset that we talked about within the spark, that might be a much longer time frame. It may not be the snapshot that a COMSTAC could provide. Again, I'd look to the operators to see if this is the forum for something like that. And so I think with the 450 spark, I think there's going to be things that may be operating on a sort of a shorter fuse time frame than a spark that would still be important, to air. And I think it might be those kind of moment in time feedbacks, like things like AC priorities. And I'm trying to think if there's anything like that, that's something. But yeah, I'd look to the operators to see if that resonates or not.
Hey, Mike, it's Mike Moses. So I think for things like AC priorities, that would be awesome if COMSTAC could help or give advice to the FAA. As it relates to the 450, I'll just use the experience with 460, which is effectively safety working group became fairly redundant to the 460 spark, and no discussions actually happened in COMSTAC. Everything just got referred to 460, and it whether intentional or accidental, it turned into a very non-efficient and not at all impacting way to have it. So the danger, I think it would be great if we could figure out how to let COMSTAC help with 450 stuff, but I think last year or so, it didn't work at all on 460. So we'd have to take a different approach if we were going to do it. But I think that's, if I had to summarize, right, that's one of the things that I would, in hindsight, like to have seen a little better, is a little more of the interactive helping with either priority setting or what topics next up for the Spark to talk about.
Yeah, I would just frame that as, implementation issues versus rulemaking issues. And the implementation is all of the things we talked about today. Workforce, developing the pipeline, resourcing, and guidance, advisory circulars, things of that nature. All kind of pre-regulatory, non-regulatory stuff.
I actually have several other.
Yeah, look, Karina, why don't you turn Karina?
Sorry, yeah, I really just have a couple of general comments, I suppose. I don't have specific topic suggestions, but having been involved in COMSTAC for the last 4 years, I guess it's been, I guess my primary observation is, like, I don't know that we have all of the right players at the table. And what I mean by that is I find that when we go out to execute our tasks, we're often contacting folks well outside of the COMSTAC to give feedback. And it would be really helpful if those people had a seat at the table, or at least their companies were represented. So there are a lot of organizations that are licensed by AST that are not part of this discussion. And I think that's a real missed opportunity. The other comment, kind of to Mike's point is, Mike Moses's point is, just be aware, I guess, that oftentimes when you're tasking things, a lot of these issues are redundant. And the reason that that's a concern to industry is it's not only the same companies that are being asked to provide the feedback, it's often the same individuals, and they're already very task saturated. So that's just something to be mindful of in the future, as one of the things that Mike mentioned. I would also request that when you all are working on new initiatives, such as like the recommended practices as an example that has also come up, that you engage the COMSTAC before you have them drafted or finalized to get those comments at that time versus asking for feedback after the fact, because we know that it's difficult to make some of those, execute on some of those recommendations once the document's already finalized. So those are just some general comments after having been involved for the last 4 years. But I think topic-wise, I mean, as the industry continues to grow, there's gonna be, no limit to how many different potential taskings you all could discuss. But that's just my comments.
So I had several possible topics for thinking about or maybe eventual tasking for the future. One, based on Congressman Posey's comments during the hearing about enabling commercial human spaceflight training through space support vehicles. Again, he was talking about starfighters, and Kelvin appropriately responded that that's not part of your authority to be able to authorize flight of high-performance aircraft, somebody else. But again, those are things that potentially could really help our industry if people who were knowledgeable and motivated to assist with those processes, not regulating them, but enabling them, if we could figure out a way to do it. And if it's just legislation, great, still trying to work that, but maybe there are other ideas, or how can we move the ball forward so that, as he said, we don't have to wait 16 years to get something approved. So that would be one. Second, I'm seeing and hearing a lot of great progress in point-to-point transportation through space. Again, AST with the limited resources has to focus on what's in front of them. But again, that's a lot of progress being made with the vehicles and technologies. If there are roadblocks, if there are challenges, if there are policies that need to be put in place or talked about, good time to be doing it now so that we don't have to say stop when the vehicles are ready to fly. Just putting that out there as one possible topic. And then a related one, the whole area of hypersonic vehicles. A number of companies now working on things that can fly Mach 4, Mach 5 faster, 80, 90, 100,000 feet. And some of them are rockets and some are turbojet, ramjet, scramjet, air augmented, whatever. And if you go on the definitions in the books, okay, well, this is a suborbital rocket and this one isn't. So I guess somebody else's. So I guess we don't have any insight in terms of what kinds of conversations, if any, are taking place, ABS versus AST. How are we going to handle that? Those travel high and fast, and there are different kinds of risks than the typical aviation type rating stuff that's done. So should AST be in the table or in charge or at least a partner in some of that? I think that could be a good one to think about. And then finally, I was brainstorming, trying to come up with ideas and listening to what's happening out in the rest of the world. Another area that I think is potentially important, but it's not in anybody's current set of responsibilities. Not NASA's, not DOD's, not DOT or FAA, and that is the idea of space rescue. Who's thinking about that? Who's working on it? How would that happen if there had been a huge issue with Polaris Dawn, that, okay, well, let me get my Rolodex, or, that's SpaceX's problem, or how can we think about how that could work over time? Is there a way that government and industry can think about that, talk about that? Right now, there's concerns of, gosh, I can't even put anybody on that task because that's not what Congress has authorized us to do. So we can't put any budget against it, we can't put any people, any resources. Industry's got the capability, but it's not fair to blame one company to try to solve it if they're going to be asked to save somebody else's crew members and so forth. So anyway, just some brainstorming, start the discussion on some of those topics might be an area that COMSTAC could help.
You're talking about in space? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, I think the in space, it's totally true, but I think I would also add interagency coordination, on recovery and search and rescue,
Sure.
Things of that nature.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's not a COMSTAC related issue, but it's just
So it's not AST, it's not COMSTAC. Whose job is it to think about? Maybe nobody, because it's sort of in the cracks in the.
Well, it's the operators. Yeah.
So.
I have one, which is, I think the COMSTAC should assess independently the value of the Common Standards Working Group and make recommendations on either reforms of that group or whether it should be disbanded and replaced with a fully inclusive group that includes government and industry.
I don't know how we decide on these things, I mean, you all look at me. So if I decide by your on the spot, yeah, I don't know, but, I mean, certainly all of the ideas are things we should consider. Again, what I think I would be looking for here, Mike, is for the COMSTAC and to come back to us and say, listen, out of our fall 24 meeting, we talked about some things, and these are the 3 or 4 tasks we want to pursue. Yep. So again, I want the group to think about it and come back to us, and then we'll.
I've got a technology topic, so just going along the thread of what technology, like how can technology augment like the existing AST resources to like improve some desired outcome, like processing licenses faster, helping applicants. You know, what type of technology is out there already that can be leveraged, or where are the gap areas? There's got to be some. I mean, obviously, I haven't looked at it, but there's got to be some unique AST specific capabilities that are required that may or may not already exist, and just kind of knowing what those technology gaps are, specifically like software. I think, well, perhaps something like that, but like a dedicated task to look at like technology stacks that could help the existing 158 staff. I think that would be probably. I'm not a big proponent of throwing technology at the problem, but in this case, I think since it's a matter of like resources and efficiency, I think it really does make a lot of sense. It would be pretty fun to look at.
Okay. And thanks for mentioning resources. So during lunch, someone told me that the Office of Next Gen manages the FAA's research budget, and it's $200 million a year. So I think that budget should be divided, and maybe the 30 million that you need to spend on some research for AST be funded out of that budget, not the AST. So I have to send that up the chain. I don't want your budget cut. I want it augmented.
Treaties are in your charter. Is there any activity in that area that we should be aware of and that we might be able to provide useful advice on?
We talk a lot about aerospace treaty, Article 6. And there was conversations on LinkedIn this past weekend as to whether or not, you know, the Polaris Dawn mission was within the bounds and scope of that or not. So yeah, there's conversations about it. Yeah, I think any advice COMSTAC wants to provide us about any of our obligations under the treaties and how we execute that, sure.
Not quite tree level, but something we did look at about 3 or 4 years ago now was the different agreements between the FAA and different countries in terms of you know, different licensing regimes and reciprocal waivers and that sort of thing. So I know you're often, I know you've continued a lot of work there, but that might be something worth a refresh. I don't know if you know, the level of activity may have stabilized, or you know, at that time there was a lot more nascent markets people were talking about. But that was an area that we had to take a look at. I think there were some updates that you all were working on that side of things. So yeah, that may be worth it.
I'll jump in here. I just shared in the chat, for those who have access to it, an article that was put out that's on this topic, the topic that Kelvin just raised with regards to the Outer Space Treaty and the Polaris Dawn mission. And I'll note that you know, a key aspect here that at least one contributor person who was quoted in the article does note is that the activity was authorized by the US government. So the Outer Space Treaty requires authorization and continuing supervision. And then, you know, the country that authorizes that activity has responsibility for the activity. So it is certainly my understanding of the treaty and of the US's compliance with that treaty. I would definitively say the US government did not violate any treaty obligations with regard to the Polaris Dawn mission. And I think that the motivations of people who posit otherwise are pretty clear and somewhat self-serving. But as in regard to an interpretation of the treaty and the Polaris Dawn mission, it is very clear to me that the activity was authorized. The U.S. government had responsibility for it, and that's it.
Yeah, certainly the launch, I think, just to give the other side of what is being argued here, Karen, as you know, I think the other side is, the argument is that, well, you know, there were things that were done in space that one would say, well, who authorized that? Who authorized the EVA?
So the mission itself was authorized. The Outer Space Treaty doesn't require that every aspect of the mission be authorized, right? So, you know, I adore Laura Montgomery, and I will raise her here as someone who regularly talks about toothbrushes in space, right? So does the toothbrush have to be authorized? Does the brushing of the teeth? So, you know, the Outer Space Treaty is a statement of principles and obligations, certain obligations that sovereign nations signatories to the Outer Space Treaty make. And the US government did authorize the activity of going to space. Had the US government, you know, decided that it was not prepared to take responsibility, then that could have been raised during the interagency, the policy review that takes place in order to license a launch. And we certainly have seen situations where activities were not authorized and that payload reviews were denied as a result of the policy review. And therefore that activity did not go to space and did not occur. And so, you know, this Outer Space Treaty doesn't say that, you know, specifically a spacewalk or the specific people who undertake the spacewalk or the occupant safety needs to be, you know, monitored or approved in a certain with some specificity. It does state that the activity has to be authorized, that the acts of non-government entities have to be authorized, and the launch is the authorization in this instance. So I think, and I don't think that it serves anyone to say that any U.S. entities are undertaking activities in that are not in complete compliance with the Outer Space Treaty. And I would say that this activity was.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I was just presenting the other side in terms of what the opposition to that point is, what they're saying. But I agree. The activity was authorized. We authorized the launch. That checked the box as far as I'm concerned.
Others on suggestions, items, folks online? Hi, Brian. Thank you.
Well, so do we have tasks? A whole bunch of stuff to think about.
You have a lot of ideas.
So I'm telling them, I'm happy to put these together. Yeah, I mean, part of it I think is probably the role for the sort of next chair, vice chair also. But I think I'm happy to sort of take these together as just, you know, as sort of, these are sort of closing points and looking forward. Absolutely. Yeah, everything's accurate. Yep.
And these will be all consolidated in the meeting minutes for public availability. All right, and the next agenda item is the public comment period. So in the Federal Register, we request that any written statement to be discussed from the public take place to be sent to me 5 days before the meeting. And I did not receive any comments and no late comments either. So with that being said, I have nothing to summarize, and there were no comments here. There's no public comments made during this time.
Excellent. Well, with that, I just want to, I think that brings us to our end here of our meeting, of my term, of many of our terms. Thank you all. Long day. Quite a bit tackled here. Thank you for all the work over the last 2 years on many of these areas. I just want to thank Karina. Thank you so much for the leadership on this. Almost all these tasks and so much of that work was started by Karina, as you all saw. Just an amazing amount of work that she put in, both as chair this year and as vice chair for those 2 years prior. And then just want to thank you, Brian, for all the work in coming into the role and helping us out. Jim had before, Jim's still in the room here. Jim's absolutely helpful before that, and then Calvin, just thank you so much for letting us be a partner. As an advisor, very much appreciate it.
Also want to echo that. Thank you, COMSTAC members, for accepting the position, to working hard for 2 years. Some of it's your third job, and I appreciate that, and the contributions y'all made to help us out. So we look forward to continuing COMSTAC in the years forward. So keep watching and keep paying attention. It's a booming industry. We're excited about it. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Excellent. All right, we are adjourned.